Hello, I'm Gabriela Rojas and I will be explaining my brain model. So I did not build a very good brain model, but this is what I built. We have the two hemispheres, the left and the right, and I color coded them so there won't be that much of a confusion on my part. And we have the cerebellum in the back and the longitudinal fissure in the middle. I am sorry if I mispronounce any of these words, but cerebellum. And right here we have where the spinal cord meets the brain, which is also the hind's brain at the very bottom. If we were to open this up, as we would, we have what they both share, the midbrain right here. On the left side of the brain, we have the bronchus area, which I made a little Play-Doh section of it. You find it either right here near the frontal lobe, near the prefrontal cortex, and it is important for language production and and this is only found in the left hemisphere. In the right hemisphere, we will look further into it as we look at the second model that I built. So this is just a 3D model. We also have in the model, as I forgot to explain, we have the corpus callosum. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. The corpus callosum is a thick band of neural fibers consisting of about 2 million axons, as stated in the textbook. But this is a way of both hemispheres communicating with each other and sending messages to each other, and it just processes with both hemispheres. So this is also where you would find the pons section right here, the medulla, which would be towards here, and the hypothalamus would be around here, with the thalamus right here in the middle, and that's what I have for this. I have another model, so that's gonna be that part. But yes, I have both of these together, which make full brain and the cerebellum. So that's the general makeup for this model right here. Now, if we were to look further into detail about the brain, we have separate lobes, their functions, and their structures within each lobe. So we have the frontal lobe right here, and the prefrontal lobe at the front, which also includes the prefrontal cortex. Within the frontal lobe would be the motor cortex, which would be found along this section right here, right around the same section as the somatosensory cortex, which is in the parietal lobe. The motor cortex would be in charge of anything to do with planning, coordinating movement, while the prefrontal cortex and lobe would be in charge of higher level cognitive function. So the frontal lobe in general is in charge of reasoning, emotion, language, and anything to do with such as focusing and comprehensional tasks. Right behind the motor cortex, we would find the somasensory cortex, which would be in charge of anything to do with sensory data besides smell. So in this cortex which would be found right here, we would find data and process data of different sections of the body, and with every different section of the body, there's a different section within the cortex that is specifically designed to take in that information and process the information. So this little piece right here would be the thalamus. The thalamus is in charge of this section right here would be the thalamus. The thalamus is a sort of sensory relay, and it's kind of like a picking, packaging place that delivers sensory information to different sections of the brain that is specifically made for those senses. So if we were to think of this as a sort of delivery on mailman, we would find that this section would deliver sensory data to the somatosensory cortex right here. Now, the parietal lobe does not only include these two sections, as it also holds the cerebral cortex. Now, the cerebral cortex would be the surface of the brain, which would be very uneven and has a distinctive pattern of folds and bumps known as gyri and grooves, which is sulci, I'm not very sure, but that's what the cerebral cortex holds. Now, the cerebral cortex is also in charge of thought, emotion, and reasoning, as well as language and memory. So it's kind of like the prefrontal cortex on this section. And gyrus is part of the cerebral cortex, as previously stated, is the folds and bumps, which would be found about right here, the brain. Moving on back to the occipital lobe, which would be the visual cortex, or would include the visual cortex. It is located right here in green, and is the primary visual cortex, which is responsible for processing visual information. Further down the hindbrain, we find the pons, medulla, and this section is connected to the spinal cord, obviously, right here in purple. This section could also be known as the brain stem. If we were to look further this way, the brain stem would be important in receiving and regulating brain activity in an individual in any state of mind. So we look further into the pons. This specific area right here would be in charge of processing data and regulating patterns in the body as the individual sleeps, and is connected to the hindbrain, which is the rest of the brain and spinal cord. It's right here, hindbrain and the rest of the spinal cord, and is in charge of rapid eye movement, which would be the movement of the eyes while the individual is sleeping. The medulla has a very separate responsibilities, even though it is still part of the hindbrain and is connected to the pons. The medulla is responsible for automatic nervous system information and processing such information, as well as breathing, blood pressure, and heart rate. Now, looking into this blue section, which would be the temporal lobe, we have functions such as the amygdala, which is involved in our experience of emotions and in tying emotional meaning to our memories. And is also part of the limbic system, which would be right here. The corpus callosum would be right here, which was also shown in this model in blue, but I put it in pink, right around the thalamus and the Woodrick's area. And this area of the brain is in charge of multiple responsibilities, or has multiple responsibilities involving sexual motivation, behavior, anything to do with regulating body temperature, appetite, blood pressure, and being sort of a connection or link between the nervous system and endocrine system. So looking further into the bronchus area, this section is in charge of language development and processing. Now, the two words that kind of got me a little bit more confused, since they sound a little bit similar to me, would be the hippocampus and the hypothalamus. So the hippocampus would be kind of another curved structure, such as this, which would be the again, the corpus callosum, but more in this direction. So kind of surrounding the Woodrick's area. The hippocampus would be in charge of giving memories meaning and connecting them to other memories, as well as memory consolidation. Now, the hypothalamus is also found near the thalamus itself, sort of like another circular or ovalish or roundish shape near the center of the brain, a little bit of brain right here. Within this area or region, the hypothalamus is in charge of any sexual motivation and behavior, as well as serving as a link between the endocrine system and the nervous system, and regulating heart rate, blood pressure, body temperature, and appetite. So that's a huge, very huge and important role played in the brain.